All right, get ready for a musical explosion. Today, we're diving into something called jazz rock fusion. Seriously, it's what happens when you take two completely different styles of music and just slam them together to create something totally new and honestly, kind of mind-blowing. So, think about it like this. What happens when you mix the super complex brain of jazz with the raw electric power of rock? You get something pretty incredible. It's like a superhero who's not only got super strength, but is also a genius. And that, right there, is the whole idea behind jazz fusion. Okay, let's set the scene. We're heading back to the late 1960s. Now, at the time, music was pretty divided. You had the cool, complicated world of jazz over here, and the loud, high-energy world of rock over there. But you know what? Some musicians started to feel like those boundaries were, well, a little boring. They wanted to see what would happen if they broke the rules.
So what exactly is jazz rock fusion? Well, it's pretty much all in the name. It takes that make-it-up-on-the-spot freedom from jazz. The technical term for that is improvisation, and it mashes it together with the loud electric guitars and the powerful driving drums of rock music. It's kind of like a musical freestyle, but backed by a full-on rock band.
Now, you absolutely cannot talk about fusion without talking about one guy in particular, the legendary trumpet player, Miles Davis. I mean, this man was already a jazz superstar who had basically reinvented music a few times over, but believe it or not, he was just getting started.
So in 1970, he drops an album that just completely changes the game. It was called Bitches Brew, and when it came out, it sounded like nothing anybody had ever heard before. It was a landmark moment, for sure. So his method was pretty wild. Instead of giving his band a strict script of notes to play, Miles basically just let them loose in the recording studio. He encouraged them to experiment, to react to each other, to just create. And the result was this dense, swirling, unpredictable sound that was completely new. But, not everyone was on board. Some of the old-school jazz fans, the purists, they thought he was destroying the music they loved. But hey, that's often what happens when you're a real trailblazer, right? You're going to shake things up. Okay, so what are the actual ingredients in this crazy new musical recipe? Let's pop the hood and break down what makes a fusion song, well, sound like a fusion song. First things first, to get that huge, powerful sound, these musicians needed some new tools. They plugged in. They embraced electric instruments to make their music louder, bigger, and more intense than ever before. We're talking about these cool electric pianos that had this shimmering, almost bell-like sound. Deep, funky electric bass guitars that laid down a heavy groove. And of course, electric guitars cranked up with distortion so they could absolutely scream. With all this new gear, they could play in giant stadiums and just blow the roof off the place. And you can really hear the difference in the rhythm. Traditional jazz was often subtle, like a quiet heartbeat with an acoustic bass and light cymbals. But fusion? No way. It was a thunderstorm. It was powerful, it was loud, and it was absolutely impossible to ignore. Okay, the next key ingredient is the beat. Fusion wasn't just loud, it had this deep, undeniable groove that just made you want to move. It borrowed the most powerful driving rhythms from rock and funk, creating this really exciting, complex foundation. And the drummers in these bands were absolute monsters. They played with so much power and incredible skill. They weren't just playing simple beats either. Most music you hear is in 4, like 1, 2, 3, 4. These guys were playing in tricky rhythms with 5 or 7 beats in a measure, which is what gives the music that dizzying, unpredictable feel. And the final ingredient, and maybe the most important, is what made fusion so exciting: the solos. Remember that improvisation idea, making it up on the fly? Well, fusion musicians took that to a whole new level. Their solos were like these wild, epic musical journeys. So here's how it would often work. The band lays down a super tight, powerful groove. Then one musician just takes off, exploring all these crazy melodic ideas. They'd use electronic effects to bend and warp the sound of their instrument, and they would just build and build the energy until it reached this huge, intense, thrilling peak. So after Miles Davis basically kicked the door wide open, a whole generation of unbelievable musicians just came flooding through. This wasn't just one guy or one band anymore. It became a full-blown musical movement. The most famous of these bands are often called the Big Three. You had Weather Report, who created these amazing atmospheric soundscapes. Then there was the Mahavishnu Orchestra, who played with blinding speed and power. And finally, Return to Forever, a band full of just jaw-droppingly talented musicians. These were the titans of the genre.
And get this, these bands were huge. They were selling millions of albums and playing to sold-out stadiums all around the world. They proved that you didn't need a lead singer or catchy lyrics to be a massive rock star. Okay, so that was then. Why are we still talking about this music today? What's its legacy? Let's take a look at the long-term impact of this incredible collision of styles. You can really see how fast it all happened. It starts with a few experiments in the late 60s. Then Bitches Brew comes out in 1970 and just lights a fire. By the mid-70s, fusion is a global phenomenon. And even after its peak, its ideas kept trickling down and influencing pretty much everything that came after. And I mean everything. You can hear the DNA of fusion in all sorts of music today, even if you don't realize it. The complex chords in R&B, the funky bass lines in pop music, the tricky rhythms in some hip-hop, the insane solos in heavy metal, fusion's fingerprints are everywhere. So if there's one big thing to take away from all of this, it's this. Fusion proved that sometimes the coolest, most important things happen when you're brave enough to just break the rules. It showed everyone that music is always moving forward, and that happens when artists dare to mix things up. And that kind of leaves us with a final question, doesn't it? Fusion was born from mashing up jazz and rock, two things that seemed like they didn't belong together at all. It really makes you wonder, what two styles of music out there today could be smashed together to create the next big thing? What's the next great collision?